Diane Slade, one of the newer members of Lamoni community, but she and Steve, her husband, have jumped in with both hands, both arms, getting involved, especially with Liberty Hall, but with throughout the community, getting to know people. Diane's going to read the memories of Edith Thorpe from her family and ancestors since the turn of the 20th century. They lived in Washington, Idaho, various places in Iowa, and of course, Lamoni.
But let me explain why Edith Thorpe is being presented here, because I think there may be a few of you that knew Edith Thorpe, but probably not very many. And the background here will be very helpful, but I remember her as the lady who could whistle at least a dozen different bird songs and bring the birds down to eat out of her hand. This phenomenal lady was able to, I can't tell you which birds, but it was phenomenal. She lived over close to where the railroad passes, and close to where Ray's injury was his house. That lady had that phenomenal characteristic, and she was the sister of Alice, who married Bill DeBarth. And so my cousin Thomas was asked to make this presentation. He's not able to get here, and so Diane is covered instead. But I want you to know that this rather remarkable lady had an extraordinary gift of being able to communicate with the birds. And I think be suggesting this whole message for that, because I had that personal connection with her, and we have about 50 testimonials like this that have been collected that we could be sharing throughout the Untold Lamoni stories. I'd like to make you aware of that so that in future years these stories are already prepared. One more I should mention is that we received a copy of a history of the Lamoni Children's Home, and I've shared it. And I can't find it. I'd like very much to be able to find the lady who was, as I recall, in Washington State, who did that research because her grandfather had been raised in part of that children's home. And I'd like very much to be able to find that book and hopefully get the lady to come to our keynote speaker class next year.
You do this in fall. So, as I said, I am Judith Thorpe. I was born June 5th, 1904 in Ashton, Vermont. Ashford is a small town in Pierce County. It is the last town as you would pass through just going up to Mount Rainier. There's a place where very tall cedar trees grow. The Nisqually River ran between our home and Ashford. It was a small, swift, boring river, fed by the melting snow in the mountains. There was no bridge to cross it. But my mother used to have to walk by, and she had to walk across this river and carry my brother James and me. My two older siblings, Blanche, age 6, and Arthur, age 8, could walk across by themselves, carrying our supplies. I could not do it, even to this day. We had nothing to live on except for what we raised, so my father worked and was gone all week. One December night, when I was 6 months old, the house burnt down. My brother James, who was 2, kept running back into the house, so my mother kept having to drag him back out. Unfortunately, we didn't get to save very many things in that fire. My sister took me and ran out to the woods. She took off her apron and wrapped around me. My mother sent Arthur to the nearest neighbors for help. They had 2 big dogs that they would keep tied up during the daytime, but at night they would be let loose. They jumped on Arthur and bit him in the face very badly. When my father finally came home that week, he found the house was burned. He was looking all around the ashes to make sure there were not any bones. He found that we are at Grandpa Ritchie's. We left Washington and moved to Cottonwood, Idaho, where Grandpa and Grandma regularly lived. My father worked in a sawmill on the farm. My brother Clarence um, was born near Cottonwood, Idaho, on July 15th, 1906. In 1908, my parents took up a homestead in the mountains right near Ned Creek. We first moved into a one-room shed. I think it was about 12 feet square. There were 8 of us in the cabin. I remember my mother saying, "This place is so small, I have to go outside to turn around." We lived there until the neighbors got together. It was only one big room downstairs, same size upstairs, and built like a The logs were not smooth on the inside or the outside, but my mom used paper to paper the wall. Favorite game at night was to look behind the room. The snow would get about 8 feet deep in the winter. We could not travel at all. We had to live there 7 months out of the year in order to move up our homestead. Every year, we moved some logs for camping for 5 months. This meant a different school for us. We gave the ground and helped to build a log schoolhouse on the homestead. Our school term was for only 3 months. One day before we moved onto the homestead, only Arthur, Blanche, and Benny were old enough to go to school. The wind was blowing so hard that Mama thought it would be safer if they stayed. Later that day, the wind subsided, and we needed to start. So Benny, who got on her horse, there were limbs and trees everywhere. Then he got to a spot, there was a fallen tree that landed on 3 children. Those 3 children were the ones that Benny and his mother would have walked with to school. It had killed them. Even to this day, for some reason, no grass even grows in that spot. While we were at a logging camp on February 6, 1912, our new baby brother came to live with us. His name was William Albert. Grandpa Richie stayed with us that week. He read to us with of action. In 13, Grandpa and Grandma Ziegler both died. Grandpa, John Lear, died on January 20th. And Grandma, Elizabeth Jane, died on March 26th. That year, our family moved with horses, cows, and chickens. We rode in a covered wagon from Nez Perce County, Idaho, to Douglas. It took us about 3 weeks, a distance of about 300 miles. What a change! We left Idaho, beautiful tall trees, to move to rolling prairies, covered with rocks. On our homestead in Idaho, we had a spring here. In Douglas County, we had a big office. We all got sick and really almost died. At this time, there was a wonderful wheat company. The things that we planted grew very well. We were about 20 miles from Mansfield. That was our nearest town. There was a store and a post office only 5 miles away. We had a wonderful crop of wheat. We're going to start fresh the next day. But then a hailstorm came. Fresh raw forest landed on us. Of course, that was the sad. It wouldn't happen again. My parents mortgaged everything we, including the homestead in Idaho, bought 1,000 acres 9 miles from there. It never did rain in Douglas County. We were living in this place in 1917 when Willie got sick. He is buried in the cemetery at Mansfield, Washington. This time, Blanche was growing up, and young men were doing a lot of buzzing around our place. Some of them even had cars. Clarence and I were having a lot of fun teasing. One day we were embarrassing Blanche more than usual, and she said, "Mama, spank these darn kids." Mama, spank these darn kids. Team Martin's battle cry. Time came when she decided to marry Walter Howard. November 11th, 1918, Dad took them to Waterville, our county seat, to get married. When they got there, they found everything in an uproar. Stores were closed. People were dancing, shouting, and singing in the streets. Everyone was so happy. They finally found a justice of the peace and were married and came home to bring the rest of us the great news. The war had ended. During the war, no one could buy flour without buying a lot of flour substitutes. We had some wheat that was second class. They allowed us to keep it for hog feed. We had a little can grinder mill. We would grind wheat every day in my lazy white. Sometimes we ate much. We were so tired of this kind of bread, we could hardly eat it. Once the folks had a little money and gave us a choice of buying us the white flour or something else that we needed. We all yelled, "White flour!" We were so excited. When they went to town, they bought the sack of flour. It cost over $30 by the time they bought some little extras. Cornmeal, rice flour, potato flour, and all other things they had to buy. Of course, we were glad to get the substitute because they were something different. Blanche and Walter had moved to Winchester, Idaho. We had ended up fixing up a covered wagon and went to Idaho also. We had a couple of cows and a few horses. Clarence and I rode horseback and rode them all the way. We moved in with Blanche and Walter. They were living in a very small house. They had 2 rooms and a bath. Their bed folded up in their wall. I do not remember where everybody slept. I slept in. Walter, Dad, and James worked in a sawmill. The men working the mill were allowed to carry home a pitchy board for kindling. They carried these boards home one at a time, which built us a good fire. Blanche and Walter's first baby, Frida, was born October 9th, 1919. That was easy to remember because there were so many 19. I went to school for a while in Winchester, but quit and went to work in a sawmill. There were about 6 girls working there. We sorted lumber, put in different places in the dry shed. 2 weeks before I was 16, found out I was only 15. I was not allowed to work there until I was 15. But soon after that, the depression hit, and they were laying off people, so I never got back. Dad, Clarence, and I moved to a little farm near Tamia, Idaho. Clarence was going to school, and I was not. I did not know anyone. I did not know what to do with myself. Idaho then passed a law that children had to go to school until the age of 18 for 8th grade. I went to Clarkston, Washington, and stayed with my Aunt Mary and finished my 8th grade. Aunt Mary had cancer operation and needed me. The next fall, she and I moved back to Winchester and started high school. I had only been in high school 6 weeks when my father decided to move back to Iowa. Aunt Mary begged me to stay with her, but I could not bear to leave the rest of my family. Dad's cousin, Tom Kimberling, decided to go with us. He and his wife had no money. They talked my dad into paying their expenses, and he would pay them back. What a mistake. We had 2 old Model Ts. He had a big Grant. We made a pretty good progress for one day. After that, we hit snow and rain and flood. No hard surface roads in those days. We often did not make more than 10 miles a day. The Grant was also in need every day, and we would sometimes have to camp and wait a week for them to get down. At this time, we almost wished we were traveling in our horse and covered wagon. We spread our beds on the ground. They would get wet, but we'd roll them up in the morning, just to unroll them the next night and sleep. We were in Colorado when we ran out of our old Model T had given out finally, so we sold it to a junk dealer. We then had to pile all that load into the other one. It was just a 1-seater car. It became very exciting. As we came near to Denver, we had nothing to eat and no more money for gas. We passed a big field that had not been gathered. Dad went to the house and asked if he might have a head of cabbage. Letty said for us to help ourselves. And Dad turned away to leave, and she said, "Wait a minute." He went back into the house. I go for bread. We ran to the bank because we had money in Lamona. And so we were able to send a telegram for $1 and have them send us $100 so we could continue. Etta Kimberly, the wife of a couple of had gone with us, had her brother living in Denver. So she and Tom Kimberly went to his house for supper. They came back later to tell us they had decided to stay there with them. All of us. We never heard from them again. Dad had said all the time that he would never pay us back. He was right. Dad had a brother, George, living in Kansas. They had not seen each other for about 20 years. So we hunted the family up for Thanksgiving dinner with them. They took us around to see all the other relatives that were living there. While we were there was a big sleet storm that came. The roads were solid ice. They begged us not to go out, but we thought we had better go. We had gone only about 20 miles when the car rolled. James was driving. I was sitting on Clarence's lap. Arthur spilled out 20 feet down the road. He was the first one to get up and ask, "Is everyone okay?" I quickly answered, "I'm good." Then I looked at Clarence. He seemed to be unconscious and his face was covered. I thought he must be hurt badly. I leaned over him and soon found that the blood was on me. I had broken out of the windshield. Someone called my cousin Delbert, who came and took the rest of the family back to Uncle George's. He took me to his place and called a doctor to come sew me up. I also had a broken breastbone. Dad and the boys got jobs taking enough money to earn to fix the car again. Then they went to Iowa without me. I stayed with Delbert till the 1st of January, 1963. I came the rest of the way in Iowa on a train. I started high school in Lamona, the second semester taking any 4 subjects I could get with such a late start. I was the only girl in the general science class taught by Blair Jensen. Casey Harder was my other teacher in 2 subjects. When school was out, we moved to a small place in Davis County, where we raised vegetables and studied them. Sometime in July of this year, 1923, there was a circus in Lamona. It was held at Attorney's over the fence from Grandpa Richie's place. I came to Lamona to see what I could see. Mary Whitman, Lorna Chasey, and I got together. We were cousins and all the same age. Lorna had a boyfriend who did not have a car, but he was a fella who did. He told the fella he would get him a date with a couple wild women who would allow us to take the car out. He agreed. This is how I met Joseph Thorpe. He had a new 1923 Model T. He was very proud of that. We started going together very steady. In September, I started school in Davis. I was going to take 5 subjects to try to make up for what I had missed. I was getting along very well. And one day in physical geography class, the teacher asked us to write a theme on which state we would like to live in and tell why. I was a bit homesick of Washington, and that was the state I wrote about. Having lived there most of my life, I knew what I was writing about. Most of the other kids wrote about California. Only one wrote about Iowa, and they had very little to say about it. Where we were then to read the story out loud in the class and tell which story we liked the best and why. Everyone in the class except me said that they liked mine the best. The teacher then told us to write another theme on anything we wanted, as long as it was something about physical geography. And again, we were to read them in class, and they would tell us which one they liked best. Spurred by my success on the first theme, I decided to write about the Grand in Washington and put some of my personal experiences in the story. I did not go home for lunch because I was going to get started with my own eyes. Got out an encyclopedia on my desk, looked for what it said about Cowleys, I wanted to do it down. I wrote, a cowlee is, good, hard, hard. To see who it was. It was the reason. I went out to him and he said, let's get married. I said, okay. So I went home, changed my dress, and told my mom what we're going to do. She and Arthur went with us to Leon to get the license. Then we drove to Lamona, stopped at Tom Bell's house, and we're married. I should end this story here and say, we're happily ever after. But this is a true story. Joe lived with his folks, his father and mother, at Andover, Missouri. I moved in with them. We got off to a bad start. A large crowd was gathered down on that night, but we slipped out. They were disappointed, so they tore up everything they could. And for months after, some threw rocks at the house and broke so many windows we had to buy hard cloth to nail over them. Joe worked for the railroad as a section hand. He made $73 a month. We thought we had a lot of money. We could get free passes once in a while to ride the train. But Joe hated this job. Once before we were married, he and Tom Williams were working on the railroad, and Tommy said, Joe, we are fools for working like this. Let's quit and go to school. Tom had less than an 8th grade education, but he threw down his schools and started degrees. He went as far as he could at Grayson, then he went to Ames, and kept on until he became a doctor. Even though Joe hated his job, he did not have the courage to go. Joe had worked on the railroad long enough that he had the most seniority. But then life became harder, and they were going to start laying off the man. Joe and Leo Harris had gone to Kansas a few summers to work at a harvest and made good money. They wanted to go again, so they took their job. And they went to Kansas, but they could not find any work at that point. He never got back into the railroad work again. From then on, all the money we had from selling strawberries and other was all we had. His folks had 12 acres in Andover. It was all in the creek, and it was very productive. Joe and his father got the idea of trading this place for 55 acres. Yeah, okay, so you'll have to come back another year to find out more about Edith, but we'll end with her story here. Okay. Anyway, we had a very productive fair, and so they decided to buy more land. Me and my mother-in-law were all against it, but they didn't listen. They went and bought it. Things didn't go well. Let's see. They bought a cow that was having milk, but that didn't have a calf. We ended up finding out that it had Baines disease, which didn't allow any cows to have calves. Ruined everything for us. We also raised any corn that we raised. The groundhogs ate it. If we tried to raise ducks, we went down to the river, which ran for our place, and we're gone. Rabbits ate our garden. There was no well. We had to drink from the cistern. Needless to say, it was not a good situation. So basically, she had it very rough, living very hard. Things were not good for them. They ended up cutting wood and trying to sell. They would sell a truckload of wood for $2.25, and that's what they lived on. At one point, as we're going through, all she says, and after Joe was gone, and we moved back to my folks. He doesn't say a date, nothing. It's just like, just kind of set up at that point, that life. But yeah, she had it tough, but she kept on going with her kids. One other quick story, she was telling about a boat ride when she was younger, that her siblings would go on a boat, but it had a hole in it. So the older siblings would take a pail and do the constantly slipping out while the others would row, just so they could enjoy it. There was one day she goes, but I'm going to do it on my own. So she started to go with her little brother's sister. Anyway, so the little one wanted to go with. And so they went out and got goodness knows the wind ticket. We don't need the order. Needless to say, they're out in the middle and the boat is filling up to the point that there's no more boat and the little one jumped onto her arms and just was holding tight. And she was trying to swim there. She was yelling for help. And it's like everyone was okay. She still continued to live and get married after that point. But I had a lot of people helping to try to get them out of the water as this child was leaning on her. But she thought that was she could do it. There's still some great stories that she had. But we have to thank you for your time and come back next year for more.